one of the things that I want to start with, and I think it's important there. I touched on it a little bit ago, but people can be easily overwhelmed by this topic. And that's because there are a lot of variables that can impact and often do impact SEO at kind of at a higher scale. And so, backlinking has an impact, and then you get into like, oh, how do I get backlinks? Or, citations have an impact. Dwell time has an impact, right? Like all of these things have minimal impact or some often larger impact, depending on kind of the competition level of search engine optimization happening for the specific term that you're trying to rank for. And so it's easy for us to look at that and say, like, there are people that get paid thousands upon thousands of dollars a month to do this thing. Like, it's not like going to post on social, right? Like, it's not something that I do every day, or not something that I'm familiar with, or not something that I'm comfortable with. And so like, I'm just going to overlook it. But the reality is most oftentimes you're likely in your website editor as a church. I mean, if you're updating your events and following the CMU philosophies, like you're updating your website, and really all you need to do is just make sure that you're telling Google what your website is about, at least today. Like, I mean, it is my hope that, every church in America understands the value of search engine optimization one day, and that they like really start to pursue this and take advantage of the opportunity that we have in front of them. But as of today, like, it's pretty wide open for you from a competitions and investments perspective. Because really all you're doing is you're just going into your website technology and kind of manipulating a couple of key factors. And I mean, you can really probably, do some damage. Now, I'm not saying that if you go in and do the things that we're going to talk about today, you're going to rank number one. What I am saying though, is if you go in and do the things that we're going to talk about today, you're most likely going to outrank the majority of the churches in your city. And you're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of where you were when you started. And that's the foundation. And then we can look at, kind of down the road, some deeper level, more advanced techniques. But I genuinely don't think that a lot of churches need that. And so one of the interesting things that I like to pay attention to are like, what are the local ranking factors? And there is a company, Moz does this, but I actually like a company called White Spark. They do basically an audit of what are the local ranking factors for local websites. And the number one ranking factor is to have your on-page SEO just solidified. So that's like the single most important thing that you can do. So like when people are talking about, personalization or citations or website behavior, like those things are so minor in impact compared to on-page optimization. Like, I don't even want people thinking about those things until they understand, like, hey, on-page optimization is something that I can control. It's something that I have direct input over on a daily basis when I'm in my website editor. And then let's just kind of see where it shakes out from there. Now, it's hard to talk about search engine optimization without really diving into like all of the kind of the things that Google can do from an on-page perspective. But like, I'm not going to dive into it in this conversation. But like, if your website isn't connected to Google Search Console, Google Analytics, you're not tracking where people are finding your website, how they're finding your website. Like that's really what you need to do. You need to go connect your website to Google Analytics. And I have all of that information and really a step-by-step process of how to accomplish that in the SEO training inside of CMU. So that is critical, because we have to kind of understand, when we're pulling levers, what lever is making the most impact. And when that lever makes, you see a small increase in your rankings because you've done something, like just double down on that lever until it stops working, and then move to kind of the next lever. And the next lever might be, citations. And then you kind of double down on that until you stop seeing an impact. And then beyond that, then you might move to link building, and you kind of double down on that until you stop seeing an impact. And so the first lever has to be on-page optimization, because what you've done is then you've created a firm foundation for all of the other things to work. And if I'm going too fast, you guys can just shut me up and tell me to be quiet and let people ask questions or whatever you want me to do. But I get so passionate about like building a firm foundation for your website, because every church in America has the opportunity to rank solely on a quality on-page score. And there are a couple of factors, and we're going to jump into those, that really make a lot of difference. But if you're not, scoring well from an on-page perspective, and I'm going to show you how to do that, it has to be the first thing that you do, because everything else is just going to be not necessarily wasted effort. It's not going to have the impact. It's almost like a sequential process, like step 1, on page, step 2, citation, step 3, link building, right? And it just kind of, you want to kind of follow in that specific order. So does that make sense?
Absolutely, man. I think a lot of people here are going, it's a little bit of a foreign language. So breaking down the on-page optimization, which I believe is what you're about to do based on your notes, is going to be really helpful. So we're all ears.
If you guys could,
like,
yeah, if you guys could give me some feedback, like if you need clarity on anything, comment. I'm not looking at, I have the feed going kind of to the left of me, but I'm going to be kind of just looking over some of this stuff that, when I want to clarify on-page optimization. And so like if Molly or Coach Keller, whoever, Jordan, just feel free to interrupt me if there's like a question or I need to clarify something in a little bit more depth. So Wakefield asked the question, what is on-page optimization? And it's a good question, because that's exactly what I'm going to dive into. So on-page optimization is the process of helping Google identify what your website is about, right? Like we can build a pretty website. That doesn't necessarily mean it's an effective website. And so what we have to do is define what effective is. And from my perspective, effective, there's 4 things that your website has to accomplish. And the number one thing that it has to accomplish is it has to allow people to discover you, because it doesn't matter how pretty your website is. If nobody visits it, it's ineffective, right? Like it hasn't done its job. And so if people can discover you, then they can kind of progress through, oh, I like these people, I trust these people, and oh, I'm willing to go and engage with these people. But if they never find you, it's pointless. And so we have to tell people, or we have to tell Google what your website is about. Otherwise, they're not going to understand like when to show people what is, like Church in My City. If you don't do these key indicators that we're about to jump into, Google will never serve up your site. And then the rest of those things that make your website effective you won't ever get an opportunity to try those, because people won't, know who you are. So I like to start with just an audit. And we have an audit tool that is really, it's just scans kind of like everything from an on-page perspective about your website. And it just basically spits out a report and says like, hey, you need to tweak this, or hey, you need to add that, or you need to do this, or you need to do that kind of thing. And it's really just a roadmap to empower you to like just check boxes. And so
share your screen for this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Am I not?
Yeah. Let's give him share screen capabilities.
Yeah. Share your screen, Tyler. I can add it to the broadcast here. While you're doing that, maybe Keller will have some thoughts to share. Zach is asking about page speed, and this might be something we get to later too. But he says he knows it's important, and can Google Tag Manager help with load speed?
Yeah. So Zach, stay with us. As soon as Tyler pulls up this audit tool, you're going to actually see how it tracks load speed and stuff, and the importance of that on page. So here we go. Let's do this.
All right. So to answer your question, Tag Manager doesn't necessarily directly, it doesn't necessarily help with load speeds. It will give you other indicators though, like are people, engaging with your website? Are they clicking on things that you want them to click on? What is the result of that action? It doesn't necessarily add value to it, but it's not going to hurt it either. Okay, so let's say, for example, we're going to want to optimize this website, and this is just kind of a temporary URL that we threw up there. So I'm not going to be able to kind of check all of these boxes through this process, but it's going to give you a good indication. So I would just go over here to this website audit, which is go.ministrydesigns.com/website-audit. And then if we could throw that in the comments, then you would just type in, and I like to, there's some keyword research that needs to go into this, and you can do that through a tool called Uber Suggest. But generally speaking, the term church in your city, for us, we're going to do Battle Creek. Church in Battle Creek generally has the highest search volume. I want to make something really clear, because we see audits come through all the time. People search or they do an audit for church near me. The audit tool doesn't necessarily work like that, because that is a proximity-based search, and proximity-based search is more impacted, or you'll have better results on your like Google My Business page and Google, Maps listings and things like that. It does have an impact on your organic rankings, but those are two very different things. And our audit tool does not have the ability to return the same results that Google would from a proximity-based search keyword intent. And so I want to make that clear. So you want to actually just kind of define what the keyword is. And in this case, it's going to be church in Battle Creek. So we're just going to go ahead and scan it. And this just takes a couple of minutes here. So like, you'll see that this page scores a 56 out of a possible 100. And then there are all kinds of things that we're going to want to take note of here. I want to make a disclaimer on this audit. Am I frozen to you guys?
Nope.
No.
Okay. I want to make a disclaimer on this audit. There are some things that matter and some things that have less of an impact. It all matters, but there's some things you're just going to have to make assumptions on. So like, for example, when you run your audit, you're probably not likely going to be able to score higher than like an 82-ish, because there are going to be things in there like, is your keyword in your URL? And unless you want to, make a subdirectory of your homepage on your, website URL that actually has mychurch.com/church in Battle Creek, which I don't necessarily recommend, that's something that you're going to have probably a negative score on. And so I wouldn't worry too much about that. There are some key things though that you do want to pay attention to, like site speed. Now, site speed has, there are a lot of factors as it relates to site speed. For example, if you're using like a WordPress technology, oftentimes plugins have an impact on site speed. What has often has a really large impact on load speeds are out-of-date plugins. So if you're on a WordPress or you're and you're running into like some load speed issues, what happens is I would check your plugins and kind of see what potentially could be slowing that down. And there's another tool that kind of does a deep dive on site speeds, which is, it's called GT Metrics. And I'm not going to go into that because I want to kind of keep it pretty simple, but there are a lot of factors that impact load speed. So plugins are one, massive images, and Jordan can speak to this. I'm going to actually just let him talk about it for a second, because he'll come into my office and he'll be like, dude, look at the size of this image. And it is like, literally, like, it could scale from like one side of the city to the other. And it is just like, it is there. And it just kills the load speeds of your website. And that's a large, when we're talking about on-page optimization, load speeds have a large impact on a highly efficient website. And then, we're going to kind of get into URL structure, which again, I kind of touched on that, and then title tags, description tags, and images. And so that's really kind of the base of what we're going to cover. So I'm just going to go over here.
And just Tyler, this is the Omega system, correct?
It is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Meta website builder.
Yeah. And so what I want to do is just kind of show you. Now, I'm not going to be able to bring the score all the way up to an 80 for a number of different reasons, primarily because I don't want to, pull down a bunch of images, but I just want to show you like how quickly you could or should be able to update some of the most basic information and see a score jump. So one of the things that we saw were, title tagging, and then descriptions, images, H tags has a large impact. Keyword, exact keyword in your title tag or your heading tags. And so, like the way that we would just fix something like that is we just go in here, church in Battle Creek. And this is actually an online giving block that I'm going to just repurpose because it essentially does the same thing. Put a little space around there, and then I'm going to put that in an H1. Now, generally speaking, it's not the best practices to kind of put it down here. You do want your H tags to be like kind of uniform in that the H1 represents the largest theme of the page. The H2 represents like sub points of the page. The H3 represents sub points of the sub points. So often you want to try to get the H1 tag to the very top of the page. And so you could pretty easily like change this to Church in Battle Creek. But I know that a lot of people don't want that to be keyword, their keyword. Yeah.
They're like,
so, but if you wanted to do that, you could pretty easily do that.
So one thing that I think that's really cool about the Omega technology, by the way, is that the H1 tags are so easy to set. So these heading tags that we're talking about, right? That first thing that Google crawls, on page optimization. A lot of website builders, what happens, guys, is they use their text styles as their heading tags. And so it makes it really tricky to figure out how to set your heading ones because or your heading two, because it changes the complete text style. Like Squarespace is one of them. They give you 5 text styles and they're combined with H tags. On the Omega technology, you have the ability to change, like separate those, right? So you have text styles and you have heading tags, and you can change the heading tags without it affecting the text style, which is really, really cool. And you do not see that in a lot of web builders.
So then what you would do is you'd want to just kind of come through and like kind of pick your H2 tags. So like you want your main keyword to be in an H1 tag. You only want one of those. Then you want your kind of the sub points to be H2 tags. Go through and do this real quick.
So Tyler, while you're doing that, basically on-page optimization is anything you can control on the website, right?
On your website, that's exactly right.
Sweet. What's the recommended optimum load speed you would say, Tyler?
You want anything under 2 seconds.
2 seconds.
So anything under 2 seconds would be. This can actually be. Now I'm doing this quick, so like if I was actually doing this, I would spend some more time on like making sure that it's like structurally it's kind of,
yeah,
H1, H2, second main point, and then H3 is under that, and then another H2 would be like ministries. That would be an H2, and then underneath ministries, young adults, students, children's, those would be H3. So just conceptually, so you understand how it works, like there's a kind of a main category, which is your website, your page, the purpose of your page, and then like a subcategory would be ministries. That would be an H2, and then the actual ministry titles would be H3. So like I said, young adults, students, children's, those would be H3s, just so that you kind of understand from an organizational hierarchy perspective. So upcoming events, this would be an H2.
Yeah. This is really cool because you're literally changing these tags in like less than 2 or 3 minutes. So it's really neat. Really quick, it just goes to show that the things that you're doing to improve SEO right now are taking you. I mean, we're going to do this within a hour span while teaching. So it's really cool how quick it can be done.
And Tyler, all this again, continue.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say again, all of this is in your SEO training you did for CMU. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It is all in there. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So we've got Houston, as in Jordan. We have a problem. I don't know that didn't update for some reason when I'll like those changes that I just made.
Well, that's lovely.
So I don't know if you want to take a look at that or send me another template. That would be helpful. So you guys generally get the idea of how to manipulate H tags, right? But then kind of more important than H tags are like your meta titles and your meta descriptions. So for example, like if we're trying to rank for the term church in Battle Creek, like we want that to be the main title tag or the main meta title of that actual page. And then we also want to try to incorporate it in the meta description as much as we can. So let's see. Okay, so none of my changes are saving. So we're going to.
Everybody knows this is a demo site. This isn't like a church website.
Yeah. It's a site that we often attempt to break, and apparently it's broken right now. So I apologize for that. So we're going to abort the demonstration, and I'm just going to go back to the audit and show you guys kind of what I would have just changed. So like the heading tags, these would have all turned to green. Which would then have probably bumped your score up to like a 60. And then when I added the description, these would have all turned to green.
So talk about that real quick though. Talk about where the title tag and description end up at, because many people might think, okay, where I'm changing the meta title and description, but what does that do?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the title, and then this is the description. So basically you're kind of telling Google like, hey, this is like the main point of this page. And that's what's going to be reflected when somebody does a Google search of that particular term. And then the description is the information that is below it. So that's helpful information because like real humans see that information, right? So like you don't just want to like keyword stuff it, like it has to make sense to humans and to Google. So you want to kind of think through that. And then there are some parameters around that as well. Like you want to make sure that your title is never more than 70 characters. You want to kind of keep that in. Let's see. You want to make sure that like it doesn't get cut off here. You want to kind of fit it in there. And the description, really want to kind of keep that. I don't know. I mean,
I think it's 160 characters.
160 characters, between 150 and 160 characters, is where you want to keep that. So, that's kind of like the basic stuff that you want to do. You want to go in and optimize your H tags. And then your images are important, like your image, URL structure. Like most people are probably using some sort of content management system that's going to have, it's going to attach a URL to the image that you upload. So you want to upload a specific file name, Church in Battle Creek, upload that, and then it's going to, just kind of add additional reinforcement, so to speak, that's what that page is about specifically.